Hi. Sorry about that. It all got a little bit crazy. Alrighty. So we're gonna start off with a normal front. Hello. Now that I've worked out the little intricacies of how I'm going to do it, I was hoping to do it through a Facebook Live, but that didn't work out in my favour, and it turned out to be more of a headache than anything, I think. Um, okay, how was everyone's week while I set a couple of things up? Now, there is a few things I want to talk about because this one is going to be a stellar of a week. Now, I don't know how many people here were able to catch the full week in politics, but it was a little bit crazy. And as much as I was trying to make the Facebook Live work, I was trying to tag and do a million things, and I even had a mini breakdown this week trying to make a whole new system work. I even downloaded a program called OBS and played with it. So I want to talk about how we're going to defeat this year's election. I want to talk about the unimaginable idea that the LNP could win another term. One of the ways that could be entirely possible is by doing this. If we divide between the left and the right. Now, what that essentially means is if the left has its own little battles and then the right has one as well. And it seems like it's not going to go well if we stick with the current way of doing things. So if we do the thing where we have the left going, well, let's fight with the Greens, we're going to end out in the same position that we were last election. So we can't do this. It's going to end out in a very toxic situation. And I don't know what to tell you. This isn't going to be what we thought it would be. I honestly thought by this point we would have gotten to a point where the left and other parts of the left would unite better. But that doesn't seem to be the case. What sort of seems to happen is each election cycle it turns into this hyperbolic, you're not left enough when they're talking to the ALP, and then when we're talking to the Greens it turns out to be, no, you might be left, but you're really sabotaging the left getting elected by not, helping out the left. And it seems like instead of just going, we can move forward together, we seem to not be able to do that. So I want to talk about a way to be able to do this. And I believe it can be super productive. And if I'm honest, I really think that we can do it in a way that allows us to have a system of where each person can say something different, and not that we don't have to agree with each person's policy. But if we want to get rid of the LNP, the only way we can do this successfully is by, you guessed it, getting along like adults. After having this crazy week of the only thing I can describe it as is like this really unusual dynamic of, well, I'm trying to do it this way and they're not helping me. And then I'm saying, I'm trying to do it this way and you're not helping me. And this is where we are between the ALP and the Greens. So let's figure out a way to not be doing that anymore. And I believe that we can do this successfully. It's a case of how we do it. I think that we're going to have to work out a way of making this work. I really, really want to see what an ALP government can do, unobstructed and with support. I mean, the LNP, as crazy as what they look right now, they're united with the Nationals to a certain extent. They're not going to go green in each other to that amazing point where they wouldn't want to get elected. Somehow they managed to work together to do it. So that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to work with the Greens so we can all get elected. I don't expect us to sing Kumbaya together, and I don't expect it to be anything other than a little bit contentious at times. What I'd like to see, in honesty, is some work done. And until I see how the left with the ALP and the Greens can figure out a way to work out their stuff, I don't know what our success rate is. I've had these conversations intensely with a lot of people. So it isn't like I'm just popping up and saying this. This is real world interaction, talking to MPs from the Greens and ALP, and there's no agreement right now. And we're too close to stuff this up. So I'm trying to do it at a base level, at a voter level. So I think that this has promising signs. But we had a crazy week of stories. I want to show you something that I found. We had one of the most nasty and vicious things I've ever seen of a wannabe Prime Minister. What if I told you the guy was going to want to kill us? What if I told you this same guy has been doing it, whether he wants to admit it or not, he's been torturing immigration people for a long time. And I told people, if you accepted this in the immigration world, you would accept everything else he was going to do. So if you were fine with what he did with all the other elections, and you were fine with how he treated them, you were going to be fine when he came for you. So, ta-da, surprise, what do you think he did? Middle of a pandemic, they were like, hey, what if we war game deploying the army from turning people away from the hospital? Unimaginable madness. Unimaginable. This isn't like the ordinary type of crazy thing to do. This is like crazy upon crazy. Can you imagine the semantics of how this would have looked? Forget politics for a minute. We're talking about real lives, real people being turned away from a hospital. So this isn't like anything else that we've ever experienced. And why would I say that? Because it's just not. And I don't think we're going to see anything like this in our lifetime. But let me go into his little plan. Check it out. This is the real plan. Oh my gosh, of course it was going to play an ad. And it's not a joke. Like, these people, understand when Peter Dutton says something like this, you take him at his word. He is a lunatic, and he absolutely will be a lunatic till the day he dies. And one of the things I found was that he doesn't seem interested in being a decent human. That's right, you read that right. He wanted to worry about morgues and all that other stuff. Like, they're not kidding around. Okay, there was no real book for this when we first, as a National Security Committee on the COVID, we were preparing the morgues. Mr. Dutton claimed that the National Security Committee of Cabinet was forced to consider terrifying options as it prepared for the nation's health system.
When we were first briefed as a national...
Before we go into what unimaginable thing the man could possibly say to make this sound acceptable, on what level were you going to be like, hey, this is like nuts? Like, really insane. I just don't think this was going to ever be what we needed. I think it was always going to be like a death cult situation. But don't take my word for it, take theirs. Listen to it, it's nuts.
Security Committee on COVID, we were preparing for morgues at public hospitals, for defence personnel to be deployed to turn people away from hospitals. We had all sorts of supply chain issues. We would have had tens of thousands of more deaths than what we've had.
So if we had have listened to the PM's plan on how to handle COVID, absolutely. Absolutely. If we hadn't had people like Dean Andrews and Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan and other premiers, even Liberal ones, like South Australian one and Tasmania doing what they did, oh yeah, we would have been in a definite spiral of a death cult. Absolutely. Do not undermine how serious that admission is. It's a serious admission. He's not just saying, whoopsie, I dropped the ball. He's openly telling you that had we fought, he doesn't have to say that he was following the Prime Minister's COVID plan. But in essence, that's what he wanted to do. They didn't want shutdowns. They just wanted to turn people away from hospitals when it got too difficult. But don't take my word for it. Take their monstrous words for it. The entire cabinet was forced to contemplate the unthinkable and insisted that Prime Morrison... What was that? I missed that. Has shown leadership. Yeah, no, he didn't show leadership. He showed a favourite. He showed a favourite state which failed at every base level that it possibly could. Keep that in mind as you watch this crap show play out. That it wasn't designed to save anyone's life. It was designed to... I reckon that there would have been this two-tiered system. Private sector would have been fine. The private hospital would have done their thing. They would have been handed provisions. But if you're in the public sector, oh, no, we should turn you away. That's what I think we're looking at. It's the craziest thought I've ever... You couldn't make this stuff up. You couldn't make up just how crazy they planned on being. You've got to be realistic about the health support available within the Defence Force and medical staff within the Australian Defence Force. And they're working with the public or private sector anyway. They were really going to do this stuff. Like, do not think that they wouldn't have done that. And that's part of the issue that we're left with. That they were really, really going to do that. And it's now going to be a problem when we're talking about how they want to handle this. the problem is that when we're talking about this death cult that the LNP have, look at the death rates already. It's already like this massive death cult. No matter how I was trying to say to people, this was going to go badly. I don't think we could have been prepared for how badly this thing could go. I know people think that Omicron isn't as bad and all this other stuff. I've seen people with it. It's bad. My son has it right now, and I can't be anywhere near his apartment. So that tells me it's bad. Man, I'm still like psyched about the whole trying to do Facebook Live and make that work. Not only did that not work, but it wasn't running well with the OBS system that I had up. And then I was getting a feedback loop. It was making like sounds within my headphones, which was telling me that it was not as clear and stuff as what I needed. I tried tagging, I tried looping, and it wouldn't even allow me to bring up a name. There must be something different whenever you try to do it to a group. I think if you do it to someone's initial Facebook page, it's a lot easier. But the moment that you say you're going to do something like, I don't know, add it to a group, it becomes more of a nightmare. It psyched me out so badly because I was so pumped to be able to bring people on, and it's still not working. What are we in, like week 12, and I still haven't worked that out. Everything else I've managed to make graphics, I've managed to do up, a whole streaming service. I've managed to work out how to make banners and videos and all sorts, but adding someone seems to be the unimaginable crap show that continues to go on. One of the things I found with the Americans is that they have this like PC, how they're doing it, I do it. I got the PC, I got the camera, the webcam up, and then I got the headphones, connected it to my Google account, bam, done. But I had teenagers in the middle of that telling me how I was doing everything terribly wrong. So don't think that there weren't clunkies with this. There definitely was. It's just the other way seems so much harder. All right. The next story I want to talk about is Barnaby the Leaker. Turns out he is. Now, when the story first broke, I think you'll remember it was said that Gladys Berejiklian had a lot to say about him. What if it was the Deputy Prime Minister? At the time, he was sitting on the back bench. But it didn't matter. The show was already bad. Barnaby Joyce described Scott Morrison as a hypocrite, a liar in a text message sent to Brittany Higgins, a month after the former staffer's rape claims exploded into the public arena. Now take this as you will, but here's how I take Barnaby Joyce. The same man who thought getting the Gardasil vaccine for cervical cancer, he thought would make his daughters promiscuous. I think he has like 4 daughters, and I don't think that they were vaccinated against a very deadly cervical cancer because weirdly he believed that would make him promiscuous. Don't know what you think about that, but I think the guy is no one to be talking about the Prime Minister, and the fact that he can't keep it in his pants and wants to tell people about how promiscuous they are. The message to Miss Higgins was sent by Mr. Joyce, who was then on the backbench on March 22, 2021. Now, this is just as COVID hit. Keeping that in mind, so keep the context in its cue. So, no, this would have been in the middle of COVID. So, really, just as things got really serious. And it was in the middle of Brittany Higgins talking about her experience and a few other things, which is 9:30 p.m. in New South Wales and at the ACT through the third party because their MP did not have her phone number. Mr. Joyce has since returned the Deputy Prime Ministership, and the leaking of the text message will stroke tensions between two of the highest political officers in the land. Now, if anyone remembers the Costello Howard little stouch, and Costello being a big crybaby saying Howard wouldn't give it to me, the big job, and you know, they were constantly leaking stories to the Daily Telegraph and numerous other outlets against each other. It was mainly Peter Costello, if I remember correctly, and it hasn't ended there. Do keep in mind that these people don't give a rat's about you or anyone else. They don't even care about each other. They just pretend like they do. The third party is known to the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, and the person will not be identified. How long until someone does let it slip, like who let the cat out of the bag? It's not very difficult. I mean, Barnaby Joyce wasn't supposed to come forward. Gladys Berejiklian really wasn't supposed to be named. But they can't help themselves. They need to dom on each other. They're like school children. Miss Higgins shared the message from Barnaby Joyce with the Herald and the Age after he called on Wednesday for an anonymous minister who made derogatory comments about Mr. Morrison in a text message conversation with the former Premier Gladys Berejiklian to identify themselves. The message to Miss Higgins from Mr. Joyce stated, "Tell Brittany Higgins and I and Scott, he is Scott to me until I have to recognise his office. Don't get along. He's a hypocrite and a liar from my observations, and that it is over a long time." So they know who they each are. There's no love lost here. With the you have to remember, every job he's had, he's either been fired from or cheated to get. Tourism Australia, he was fired. He's seating Cook, he only won 8 votes, but he did this thing where he slandered very badly the person who did win it. I think his name's Michael Talk. And it was quite clear that this was going to be the attitude of Scott Morrison to win at all costs. But he didn't care. He didn't care who he harmed or how he was going to do that. All he cared about was that he got his way, and what do you know? He got his way. So, in a statement, Mr. Joyce said he unreservedly apologised in the last 24 hours, and he's become aware that a screenshot of the text message has been circulating amongst the third parties that contains comments I made in March 2021 when I was a backbencher. While the text message was supposed to be in private, what I said in that message was wrong. I have unreservedly apologised to the Prime Minister for my comments, he said. It is a common knowledge that in the past the Prime Minister and I had not always seen eye to eye. I have worked extremely closely with the Prime Minister over the past 7 months since I returned to the role of Deputy Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is a person of high integrity and honesty. Really? Really? Mr. Joyce, if that's what you call high integrity and honesty, no thank you. I have a different impression of that. I was told this before by my beautiful friend, so I don't know. Is that better to see? Because I like for you guys to read along with me, and I think I haven't been doing it right. In a statement, Mr. Morrison said that Barnaby approached me this week to inform me the text message. He sincerely apologised. I immediately accepted his apology in good faith. Well, would you look at that? You may have said terrible things about me. You can even say that I might be a bad person and a liar and a hypocrite. But all's forgiven when you got one seat in a majority. Oh boy, that escalated quickly. But I mean, this is part of the course of these people. They think this is the norm. It's just not. And I think that that's where we're at. We truly are at a point where it's just ridiculous. I understand Barnaby was in a different headspace last year, both professionally and personally, so I know he genuinely no longer feels this way. Relationships change over time. Really? I didn't know relationships changed over time, Barnaby. Should I ask your first wife? My gosh. I bring up scandals like that at a Conservative because they're always touting family values by having none. And, yeah. What the... I don't know what that is. Okay. That was weird. Okay. Since coming to the role of Deputy Prime Minister, it's fair to say that both positively surprised each other. We were never close before this and never pretended to be. But in the roles we have recently found rhythm and have concluded, hold on one sec, that the Australia and I think it's the United Kingdom and the US settled our climate change policy and continue to fight for the pandemic. One tiny ticket. I just remembered something little to me, and yeah, insanely, I have not edited it. Because if I don't, people aren't going to see it. I'm thinking, why hasn't that come up? Now I know why. Okay. One sec, bear with me. Oh man. Okay. Right. So now here we are. So, is this really what they want to go with? That they settled the climate change policy and continued to fight for the pandemic. How is fighting for the pandemic trying to open up the country way too soon? The revelation of the explosive text message to Miss Higgins comes just days after Network 10 political editor Peter Van Onselen claimed to have a copy of the text message exchanged between Miss Berejiklian and an unnamed federal cabinet minister. In those text messages, former Premier called the Prime Minister a horrible, horrible man, and the unnamed minister said he was a complete psycho. So that kind of puts it in the right ballpark of where we are. On Friday, Mr Joyce criticised the motivation for the Liberal Cabinet Minister to have alleged to leak the text message criticising Mr Morrison. Because they know, one would argue that this is done, so say come election day, they get to do something like this. This is how the game is played. Okay, so you've got player A, the Prime Minister, player B, leaker. Right, so the news cycle works like this. On a week-by-week basis, they can say, well, we told you about this scandal. Doesn't matter whether it's 6 months or even just a small 4 months out from the election. By the time you've hit the election peak, right, once you're at a point where you're like top peaking it, this story will be done and dusted. And then they'll be like, yeah, but you already knew this. Unless you're following keenly, no, not so lucky. So one would have to think that this is almost this devilish plan to make the Murdoch Empire seem more unbiased, and for the Prime Minister to have aired his dirty laundry months before an election. Now, you can call me cynical if you like, a lot of people do, but I think this is a touch evil. Sure, we can look at it several different ways, but let's look at it the way that I know best and call them on this. This is bad. So if I'm correct, these text messages of Barnaby Joyce and Gladys Berejiklian calling the Prime Minister a psycho has to do with the election, how the election cycle works. So leak it now in like January, February, call the election in, say, March, May. I'm hearing that it could be either March or May. And then by then everyone's forgotten the story. But he says that they're doing it for the purpose of malice and vindictiveness, for your own personal gratitude. Therefore, it is to be disregarded, he told the ABC. Now, wouldn't it be good to just disregard it? Now, if this was Labor, they would hold off on a story like this till closer to the election cycle. They would have this, I don't know, a couple of weeks before a big New South Wales election comes out, and then it just dies out. See, when you do something stupid, you think I don't notice. Yet, I busted them. And they know I did. So when I was like, yeah, what if this was all deliberate? And what if this is, because they do this every cycle. Every cycle they'll do this like little hatchet job on one another. And somehow they'll survive because people have forgotten about it by the time the election is called. This is almost genius. This is how you do it. This is how you smash one another. And because they've got this media cycle that's so friendly, they don't have to worry about it being brought back up. No one's going to ask them about it come March. So this is now aired. They've now aired their dirty laundry and whatever else is hidden behind it. And they can pretend like they're not biased. The messages to Miss Higgins were sent by Mr. Joyce the same evening of the ABC Four Corners program. Went to air with new details provided by Parliament House. Security guard Nicola Anderson about Miss Higgins' alleged rape was allegedly raped in Parliament House. It is not clear if the program prompted Mr. Joyce to send the messages, but in the preceding weeks, Mr. Morrison had been heavily criticised in his initial response to Miss Higgins. He claims, one sec, I have to turn on the light because it's driving me crazy. And I'm old and I can't see. Okay. Now I can see better. I forgot to do lots of things before this thing went up. And teenagers' help was very limited. So I could only ask maybe 2 questions. Okay, at this time, then Defence Minister Linda Reynolds was also under fire for calling Miss Higgins a lying cow. She still has a job, right? She still sits pretty on everyone's money to do this, to slander victims. Because that's what it should be about, shouldn't it? Us paying this ridiculous woman to attack victims of rape. Oh, it's so repugnant. I don't even know where to go. Miss Higgins is due to appear at the National Press Club next Wednesday alongside former Australian of the Year Grace Tame to discuss the Jenkins review of Parliament House workplace culture. Miss Higgins' rape allegations, which are due to return to court in June, eventually triggered a series of reviews in the culture of Parliament House and a national conversation about the treatment of women in Australia. Yeah, because they're so great at doing it that we now need a big overlook, a national conversation, because the Prime Minister bungled it so badly. That's what we need. That's how we seem to deal with it. Moving on. Bruce Lehman, the accused has pleaded not guilty to sexual intercourse without consent at Parliament House in March in 2019. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said Thursday night that he was not surprised by the text messages that accused Mr Morrison of actively spreading lies about Miss Berejiklian. Later last year, French President Emmanuel Macron declared, "I don't think I know," when he asked if Mr Morrison had lied to him about the decision to dump the proposed attack class submarine in favour of a nuclear power boat that will be sourced from Britain or the United States. Now keep this in mind. This is this slow build to a narrative. And it's a narrative that I don't think the Prime Minister can no longer deny. I've got these on weird. The narrative is that he is a consistent liar. Now, even if you talk about a story that can be leaked months before an election or days before an election or even weeks, something that the Prime Minister is not able to escape is this. He is a massive lying monster. A monster that would have had you turned away from a hospital if you needed it. But don't take my word for it, take theirs. They clearly outline how demonstrably bad actors they are. The Morning Edition newsletter, hold on. So now, when we take a look at what that means, this means a lot of things for a lot of moments. This means that in our political space, we openly have a got. You expect a little bit of dishonesty in politics, so don't assume that if you were to vote Labor, that everyone was going to be honest and everything was going to be completely hunky-dory. That's not how it works. All politicians will tell a lie. But it's the lies that they don't need to lie about that seem to be the real issue here, and the promises and the backstabbing and the greed and the not caring about the community that I personally have an issue with. Look, we can all sit back and discuss later on how and when the right time to do this sort of stuff is. But I think when it comes to the LNP, they are so bad at making things demonstrably worse. We are in a really, really horrible situation, and I don't see a way out for the wider community while they behave this way. I mean, if we're honest, we are in one of the worst positions that I think I've ever felt like we are in. Politically, I think we are in a really, really awful position of people just not paying attention. And if I'm honest, they're not paying attention because they haven't had a reason to yet. And I think the problem is that even when people start paying attention, what are they going to be paying attention to? The media spin on the attention needed, or are they actually going to take a chance, look at what we're looking at, and then make a thought from that? Okay. So next we're going to talk about something that I'm really, really concerned about. Now, it's COVID. This week we had this crazy movement of truckers going interstate to Canberra. Now, I've got no problem with people rocking up and peacefully protesting, but that's not what this was. Check out what this little crazy mob did. Okay, so this is like in an area where, oh, am I still on? Oh, I don't know what just happened. Oh. Hold on. I have closed too many things down. Okay, so I have so many little things open, it's insane. The anti-vaccination people seem to have gone to a new level of crazy right now, and I don't know what to do about it. Not only have they gone too far this time, but I believe that they're really, really dangerous. I'm not sure which one that's grabbing from. One sec. I need to fix it. See, you get technical things and even the things that you want. Okay. Nope, it did it again. Right. I know what I did wrong. There. Boom. Okay. The Canberra city, so keep in mind, Canberra has a high vaccination rate. Like, these people were ready. They weren't just ready, they knew how to do this. And they were prepared to do it. So to see what happened next is pretty amazing. Canberra is a city of protest, so of course it is. It's the national capital and vibrant democracy, and people come up to protest politicians. All kinds of views are flaunted and shouted, which are outrageous to some Canberrans, but nothing but common sense to others. The protest is much of a part of the city as pollen is in summer and it's in the air. But the anti-vax protest is different. It feels like an alien visitation from another world of an alternative reality. Now, why would it feel like that? Maybe because they did something so extreme this time, and it was so not in line with what the public needed. And let me tell you this, I am up for a good protest. So do not think that my dislike for this protest is anything more than just saying they have the right to do so. I'm happy for them to do whatever they need to do, but they're weirdos and they turned up with Trump flags. I'm not even sure that they know which country they're protesting about, which is weird. Okay, and it's so offensive in the city where 98.6% of the eligible population are double vaccinated. Are you able to see? I think that if I zoom a bit more, and you don't need a mathematician to translate that 98.6% into an all protest against vaccination in a vaccinated city amounts to a contempt for the citizens who have done the right thing. Now, it's not hard to agree with that. It's almost like they're poking the bear of common sense. And when the bear bites back, they're like, oh no, you're being unreasonable and you're attacking our freedoms. No, what they're basically saying is, hey dude, we did the work, now at least be nice and not come here and be dicks. Canberra is also a rational city, even that the design is rational. I don't know, I've never been there. This is not some higgledy-piggledy urban amalgamation which has grown through the centuries. It was designed by a brilliant husband and wife team of designers. I didn't know that. It is a city of science and a raft of scientific bodies. So we have this bunch of science denying ignoramuses in the midst, and it feels offensive. And they have every right, of course. They do. Freedom of speech extends to people with loopy views too. But the current camp is of nomadic protesters is in a different order. Check it out. Check it out. This is the intelligent mob. This is what they were doing. Seem like silly nillies to me, but the arrogant way in which they park on the public lawns and attack our buildings is offensive. It's hard not to agree with every word this writer has put out. Why? Not just because it goes with how I'm thinking about it. It's because it's how we all should think about it. Each action has a force of a reaction. So when these people come out and they think, ha, I beat the system and I did it my way. Sure, buddy. But the arrogance that you display when you rock up in your little car and try and park on Parliament House lawns and then trash the place in a place that's 98.6% vaccinated, I think you're going to find a bit of trouble. Some Canberrans are offended by people who agree to differ on many things and agree on this one thing. The anti-vaxxers bring nothing to the city except trouble. When Black Lives Matter people marched, the pandemic had started. There were people who thought they shouldn't have, including me, but recognised the strength of the feeling of a legitimate cause. See, there was a difference. I believe that they shouldn't have been gathering, but I understood why they were gathering. It made sense. In the sense of a deadly pandemic that you can transmit through breath. I think you look like an idiot. That was like, hey, and these people aren't vaccinated. So this is a very deadly virus. And I don't want these people harmed, and I don't want them to create more mutations. Cue the idiots unite cause. But when the eco-warriors block the road and many are enraged, including me, but I still think it's part of living in the capital of a democratic country. Now that's a good point. If you live in a country where you know that, you got the capital city and you've got the politicians, and they do have a right to do this. Do not mistake I do not like these idiots to think that it takes away some of their rights. They have an absolute right to do it. But really, what are we encouraging? I rant a bit in the car and then find an alternative route. By the way, push me from their cause. The attention-seeking anti-vaxxers and an alien sentiment flying their Trump banners, hijacking the Eureka flag are a different matter. I mean, imagine being so stupid that you rocked up to the Canberra Parliament House wanting to talk to the Australian Prime Minister with a Trump flag. Oh, God have mercy. They do it like it and don't even think, oh, this was smart. I mean, it's hard not to poke fun at them. It was like punching themselves in the face and then they're wondering why people are laughing. Apart from anything else, they assault journalists, including me, when I was dared to question 3 of them about their anti-vax views. Dude, you can't go around punching people. This is not like you get to, I don't know, be a dick just because the people don't believe in what you do. And if you can't be questioning what you're doing, should you really be doing it? If you can't go, hey, what you protesting there, buddy? And they're like, no, I get to punch you. And I don't even know what this is. Whatever this is, make it stop. The stupid has to end at some point. But I digress. Okay. Uh, these young confrontational men flexing muscles simply snatched my phone and camera. Oh my god. Do you know how terrifying that would have been? They're now violent. They're not just saying, "Hey, listen to my protest." We're going to be violent in trying to get our message across. It's insane. So don't tell me it's a movement for democracy. Please don't. The protesters' tents are an alien intrusion, which they suddenly landed from far away, whether from the dark corners of the internet where the creepy crawlies of Trump land live, from the eco-refugees of deep country in Australia, rallying against technology even as they depend on it to live their remote lives. That's a really interesting thing. On one second, have they tested the veracity of the live part of Facebook and stuff? Do they not know that it may have given him a microchip secretly? Hush, hush. No, I'm kidding. Of course, I'm kidding. But you have to say that because YouTube gets a little bit snotty about these sorts of things, and you can't say things like that. Because apparently saying it means that you're vocalizing their weird sentiments. I mean, I have engaged these people, so I'm like, haha, how do you know that going live wouldn't give you the same 5G craziness into your body as what the vaccination would? Can you see it? No. Could you see it in the vaccine? No. So why not take the vaccine and worry about the live stream? That was my way of saying don't do it on the internet, you idiots. And once you put it on the internet, it's there forever. Dumber. They were not the strongest links in this country. Like good Democrats, we will tolerate them. Exactly. Like polite Canberrans, we will drive past without acknowledgement. But the sooner they take off and return to their own planets, for the better. Now, it's like, it's got this real creepy feel to it. And when I was watching this, like, play out in real time, and I'm watching the Trump flags go up, and I'm hearing him say, "Don't vax me," and with their insane rants, I was like, is someone gonna like tell them that we're in Australia? Is someone gonna mention that, hey, you look nuts? Is someone gonna mention that you can't just park your weirdo van and pop a tent up and just sort of camp out there? Is someone gonna like stop them from doing this stuff? But then someone answered all of those questions for me. Now, this is where it got super interesting. I was like, who is making sure that they are being moved on? Turns out there were people making sure of that, and there was a contract awarded to this very cause. Now, this is controversial. I believe in the right to protest. Hell, the Aboriginal embassy, I believed in still to this day. That has full legitimacy. Those people deserve First Nations rights. There is a difference between our First Nations people rocking up to the Capitol saying, "Acknowledge us. You murdered us, you did all these horrible things." Like, for the people that are our First Nations people, we've never treated them well, ever, in history. Still today, we can look back and we can go, no, that's still not right. However you higgledy-piggledy put that in there, it's still wrong. So, I believe in the tent embassy of our First Nations people. I also believe in these people's right to protest. What I don't believe in is what they did here. And that's what makes this a little bit of a issue for me. Now, this is going to be a problem. So here's what ended up happening. The ACT policing began moving on the anti-vaccine mandate people. And it turned into a bit of a crazy show. And I want you to stay with me when I start talking about what happened here. Because keep in mind, this can happen to almost anyone when they're going to protest. So what these people kind of did is they exposed how quickly the government wants to silence people, even people that you don't agree with. Check it out. Hold on. I want to play this properly, and I want you to hear it, and I want you to know it. I don't have to agree with these idiots. Do not think that I am part of this weird movement. But I do think that they do have a right to do it. Now, check out what happened to them in this process.
Nearly all the vehicles have been removed.
This is overkill.
Don't incite no one to be rude or abusive to the police. They're following orders. We've heard that before.
Alright, before that continues, that little spiel of their following orders, what they're actually alluring to, which is something super offensive, they're actually talking about the Holocaust and how people followed orders. That there is a demonstrably insane, insensitive thing to say. I'm not a let's burn things down kind of person. But if you're comparing anything to the Holocaust, particularly something as stupid as let's protest a vaccine that saved an unimaginable amount of lives, you're an idiot and you deserve whatever comes your way next. But one of the things that I'm concerned about is how quickly the police were like, no, we're just gonna... I mean, we've seen this before with the BLM protests, how they were all like converged into the railway station, and then they smoke bombed them and pepper sprayed them, and they were awful. So there is something wrong with the police end of this. Do not... I do have a slight issue.
I was removing the bottles. This truck's literally about to pick it up.
Yeah, asking to pick up bottles is smart. They shouldn't be dumping crap.
The more people are going to come and take us up.
We stand together.
Dude, stand together for something that really, these people could be so useful. They could be useful, productive Australians. Instead, it's a weird moment where they've picked this weird fight in the middle of something where lots of people are dying.
The suppression order must be lifted.
It's suppression order. They just sort of thought that they could camp there, which got a bit weird. Unfortunately, they convinced some of our First Nations people that this was going to be bad for them too. Which, in some sense...
Everything's okay, children. Everything is okay.
In some sense, they were right to hone in on this. Because with our First Nations people, we absolutely experimented on those people. We as a nation allowed our leaders to experiment different vaccinations on our First Nations people. So they tuned into something real. So don't think that I'm like, hey, I'm just anti-everything and I don't see objectives. I see this. But this isn't a way to fix things. They're assaulting journalists. They're just camping out the front of Canberra. And they're acting like hooligans that none of them are wearing a damn mask. None of them are protecting each other. A lot of them are pretty damn old too. Look, I'm not old shaming people, but this is like a thing that's killing a lot of older people. Look, I'm nearly 40 and this thing could have like bam got me. So I have enough comorbidities for this thing to go, hey, you want to play? Yeah, this thing could have absolutely gotten me. That's why I'm taking it seriously. This thing is not to be trifled with. So, this part matters. How they handled this was appalling. Hey, how do you get rid of that? What? I don't want you anymore. No, gone. Stop. Yep, that's just gonna keep appearing because it's weird. Okay. The anti-vaccine mandate protesters have moved to the exhibition park in Canberra after police removed tents and vehicles. One sec, this only has 8 seconds to go, and it's going to go crazy. Okay, I can hit an X on it now. It was driving me crazy. It's amazing the amount of this is almost a sign that I have no focusing issues. Okay. So they went in and removed tents and vehicles from the illegal campsite. This comes as a 44-year-old male protester was arrested after police found a loaded, modified rifle in his vehicle. No arrests were made in relation to the crowd behaviour. Now keep in mind, someone came with a gun. Someone came with a gun. Dude, how American does that sound? I know, I shouldn't be so awful. Things like this happen all over the world. They came with Trump flags and some dude just thought, hey, I've got a gun, how about I share that thing around? That's insane. You can't just sort of go, hey, I've got a gun and I'm going to do this. It's terrifying. Imagine the journalist trying to cover this. Protesters are reportedly travelling down a Northbourne Avenue, delaying traffic, honking horns, with some people leaving their vehicles and waving red ensign flags. The flags, ensign flags, I haven't heard of that. The flag has been co-opted by the sovereign citizen movement. Oh, those geniuses. Dude. Homework assignment this week. Look up the sovereign citizen movement. It's like the flat earthers, only dumber. At least the flat earthers kind of had like this half legitimacy of, well, I haven't seen how round the earth is. And they think the pictures from space were all made up. And how could you prove it? Because the only pictures of space were of the government. And you could have a bit of a laugh. It was funny. But the sovereign citizens, absolutely, they're like little criminals that pretend like no laws apply to them and everything that they do, illegal or not illegal, they should be allowed to do it. So if you really have time this week, catch a stream of dumb sovereign citizens. Some of the points that they did make were legitimate, but by and large, they are idiots. It's a hilarity all on its own. You will not be disappointed in any funny video that they've got. They don't mean to be funny. That's the amazing thing. These sovereign citizens don't think it's funny. They think they're like legit, like owning you. Like, I didn't know what to say to that. They're like, ha, I owned you. I'm like, dude, that was weird. Okay. A group which believe laws do not apply to them. That's a perfect example of what the sovereign... in one of them, I know I digress so much, but I have to tell you, they've got this thing called traveling in a vessel, which means they do not have to register their vehicle. They do not have to get a driver's license because that is an act of commerce, right? I was showing my little brother this today. And he's like, where do you find this crazy stuff? And I'm like, no, legit. It sort of just stumbled across my desk and I thought this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Oh, I should actually. Let's digress a little bit further. I want you to see these crazies for what they are. This is like just oh no, I shouldn't. But if you get a moment, catch these sovereign citizen crazies. Okay, so about 100 police officers, including a specialist response group, and the Australian Federal Police that's a lot, on the campsite Friday morning and began removing swags, tents and chairs. Now, I have to hope that their stuff was returned to them, because the police doesn't have the right to seize them and not return them, as long as the people didn't return back to the people's house. Okay, with that stuff. A total of 4 vehicles have been towed, with others leaving the site voluntarily. A small amount of camping and other equipment was also seized by police. The Canberra Times understands that a number of people within the group splintered off Thursday night with plans to head to the camping grounds at Epic. By Friday morning, the campers were forcibly vacated from the Patrick Whitelawn site, and they intended to head to the new location. The campsite at Epic cost $35 per night for an unpowered site, with 109 spaces available. It is unclear whether the camp has reached its capacity at this time. It's a bit of a plug for the local business, which, who can begrudge that in the middle of the pandemic? So, it did get a little bit crazy, and they, $100 that bike is not legal. $100 that dirt bike or whatever it is not legal, because that's the sort of people these are. While the camp has now been cleared, the leaders of the movement said they plan to hold the line and remain at the site until the next week. To clear the site, police moved in line from Parks Way westward and methodically removed vehicles, camping equipment, 10 to 15 metre increments. On Friday morning, the police issued a warning that illegal camping equipment and illegally parked vehicles from the site set up on the lawns behind the National Library would be removed. Now, some of it did look a bit rough if you had a look at what this looked like. What this looks and feels like, particularly for causes that I'm a fan of, like the Tent Embassy and others, this looked violent. Even if I don't agree with anything they're doing, and believe you me, I wish these people were vaccinated, I wish they were wearing masks, and I wish they protected each other and themselves. But because they didn't do that, it's hard to co-opt into any crazy that they were pulling here. And the police seizing this stuff, I have on good authority that a lot of people were not able to collect some of their items as of this point. They do plan to go back later. Unfortunately, I'm related to some of these crazies, so it's going to be a problem. They're not going to stop. They truly do believe that this is like holding the line of something magical. And when you look at these sorts of images, it's hard not to think of how crazy this got. You know, they're deconstructing tents, they're, you know, trying to intervene in a way. See, and I don't believe in police as a force to be used as just an enforcer. I believe that they're there to serve and protect the community. But this was, a lot of people could end up with COVID because of this crazy movement. I'd imagine that there will be a spike. It's interesting that they just sat on the ground. Some of these photos, when you look at it, you think, this group has a towing contract with the police, and they've all been given a 1-star rating on the website. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, how they have harassed the towing company, which did take away vehicles. It does look like, by and large, that they were just hanging around yelling stupid things. If we didn't have a pandemic, these guys would be... There's no mandates. What do you mean mandates? No, there's no lockdowns, there's no nothing. There's just wear a bloody mask and get vaccinated. These are simple, basic things. Look at the Trump flag. Look at it. Look at it. You hillbillies, weirdos. I agree with their talk on Scott Morrison, just FYI. What flag is that? I don't know what flag that is. I don't know if someone can answer that. That would be great. But, I mean, this is going to be a real problem for them now. While the camp has now been cleared for leaders of the movement so that they plan to come back to clear the campsite, police move the stuff. They urge those in the area to move the equipment and vehicles, and when asked to do so, the items that are not moved away will be seized by the police. Police issued a warning for the campers at 7:30 a.m. after things turned ugly on Wednesday, when a woman allegedly obstructed a pathway of a police officer and appeared to be lightly shoved aside. 3 people were arrested and faced charges. Stop it. A police presence at the camp's entry was maintained for most of Thursday, with officers forming a line to prevent additional vehicles from entering the site. The Canberra Times understands that the group was part of an international Millions March against mandatory vaccines. Yeah, Millions March. I seem lucky to be 100. But that's me, and maybe the camera angles are wrong. They did this like with Trump, and they tried to pretend like, yeah, millions turnout for him. It wasn't millions. It was weirdos with nothing better to do. When you look at any real BLM protest that had real people with a real cause, and they were really, really polite people by and large. When federal so they are planning to stay on the nation's capital until at least Thursday, February 8th, when federal parliament returns to the first sitting week of the year. Now, I would like for these people to actually rail against the government that was actively trying to kill us in the middle of a pandemic and had a plan to kind of like turn us away from hospitals. That would have been like the smart thing. Not these idiots, no. They'd rather work against the mandates to help keep people alive. The group is loosely structured, a coalition of anti-vaccination movement and religious groups and the other fringe conspiracy-driven ideological groups. ACT Policing would like to thank the community for their patience while multiple road closures and diversions were in place today due to planned and unplanned events in the area. Traffic disruptions may continue to occur in the Parliamentary Triangle area in the coming days, they said. ACT Policing have confirmed that their peaceful protesting in the Parliamentary Triangle is permitted, however, the camping and parking without authority is not. Now, this is... Some of them were truck drivers that drove down. Right, and what they were doing is they were forming this rhetoric that having to come into, say, where I am in Queensland, and to have to be vaccinated was horrible, and to have to wear masks and to have to prove that you were vaccinated is all horrible. So they started to create food shortages by just not being decent human beings. There will be, of course, people that genuinely cannot be vaccinated, and the ones that genuinely cannot get lumped with the idiots who have chosen not to out of pure political spite and made it a political issue rather than just a, hey, I want my fellow man to live, let's do it together. They're absolute monsters in my eyes, but, you know, so I want to talk about, there's another part to this that has definitely impacted the area of where they are. So check out what happened next. This, I'm building a rhetoric here so you understand exactly what they did. I believe in everyone's right to free speech and to say things and to do things that they need to do. But that's not what they did here. They were vicious, they were violent. One person brought a gun and some Trump flags. Unimaginable monsters. Okay. So here's what they did. The convoy to Canberra protests leave negative reviews for QBN Towing Company. The QBN Towing Company has been forced to shut down its website and remove its phone number from the internet after being targeted by Canberra's anti-vax sovereign citizen protesters. So now they're just sort of like, hey, I'm going to do the bad thing. Let's build a narrative that everyone else is wrong here but us. This is where we now have entered into Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs sort of movement. Now, the company was inundated with negative reviews and called for the tow group's cars after it towed the group's cars from outside the National Library of Australia. On Friday morning, All States Towing, which has a contract with the Australian Federal Police, received hundreds of one-star reviews from protesters, many of whom are truckers claiming they were un-Australian and traitors. Owner Zoran said he'd been bombarded with calls and negative reviews from angry protesters. In a statement, they said, we are engaged by the ACT police to move vehicles that were parked. I'm no fan of a towing company, but dude, it's a company. I'm having difficulty understanding why these people thought, you know what, I'm going to park on the lawn of Parliament House, and not only am I going to park there, I'm going to camp there. And if I'm told not to, and my vehicle is towed away because I'm somewhere where I shouldn't be, I'm going to pretend like it's everyone else's fault. And that's exactly what they did. Okay, so they were parked on the grass nearby the legal parking location today. We moved cars about 100 metres down the road to a legal parking spot and off the grass. We did not charge any of the owners of the vehicles to move these cars to the legal parking spot. As far as we're aware, all the vehicles are accessible to the owners and have not been impounded. The ACT policing releases a statement confirming vehicles were towed from the location as their owners refused to move them. Protesters set up an illegal camping site, Patrick White Lawns, but were moved on after they seized equipment, made an arrest warrant for a firearm and ammunition in the process. This stuff, what they did is monstrous. In a response to the negative reviews, they have posted with 5-star comments stating that the business were doing a 5 job. Many people counterattacked that and then said that they were doing a fine job. Protesters also attacked Young All Stars Towing despite it not being the company responsible for the towing their cars and is located in Victoria. So they went after a whole nother towing company, right? So they were like, no, we're mad at this towing company, but we're going to find one with a similar name and attack them in Victoria. What could possibly go wrong? One sec. Okay. All right, so what ended up happening after this? The owner, Gary Young, said he was very disappointed in people's reaction and feared it would damage the reputation of his business. He posted to Facebook saying that the business had nothing to do with the Freedom Rally towing their cars. These geniuses went and attacked a totally innocent towing company that has earned its legitimacy. Now people now know of this company. Now, towing companies do not have the greatest reputation. They're typically the sort of people that you're screaming at, like, why are you taking that? If you've ever driven in the city, you'll find them quite regularly. It's a bit nuts. So, next I want to talk about the Prime Minister. He made some comments about the price of milk and bread, and actually he was asked about it. And this has been going, I've been told, for a long time. So, in our political space, we like our leaders to be up to date on this kind of stuff. Albo was also asked questions, but not about milk and bread. They weirdly asked him about tampons, because that makes sense. Not ask him the same question, no. Ask him about tampons when he only has a son. Seems legit. The media seems hell-bent on the gotcha questions with Albo. For the Prime Minister, it seems to be the easiest drive-through sort of question that, I mean, they all should be prepared for. They all should be prepared for what is the cheapest loaf of bread costs. For instance, okay, for a while there, I don't know if you'll remember this scandal, but Coles and Woolworths were caught using non-fresh dough for their bread. They were charging $1.10 for that, right? And when they were caught, they went back to 95 cents. Now it costs you $1.40. Because they weren't just happy to restore it to $1.10. No, now they've really got to dig in their heels and charge you $1.40 a loaf, because that time frame that they were ordered to not charge as a fresh loaf of bread, apparently that cost them a bit of money. So much money, but that now they're charging you $1.40 a loaf. That's the sort of stuff I expect my Prime Minister, no matter which political persuasion, to not. I want them to know that, because that is real bread and butter stuff. If I know that, you should know that. If I know that story, you should know it. And that should be the talk of your table. Why was Coles allowed to do that? Why are we allowing that kind of nonsense to go on? And what does that mean for our elderly pensioners and others that are struggling? So when I show you this is outrageous. I want you to know that this is not normal. Scott Morrison this week admitted he didn't know how much the staples cost, given a similar question have been undone other politicians. It was wise not to take a stab. Why not? Why not? Why couldn't he? They know that these questions are going to come up. This isn't like, Angela Merkel does her own shopping. It was later revealed this week. And New Zealand Prime Minister does, and she even paid for another person's groceries. This is not unrealistic, albeit for a woman to be the one that shows you how this stuff works. This is why I think sometimes women as leaders are just better fitted to this stuff. They're more down to earth and they know what's going on. These women prime ministers still do this stuff, and they're not afraid to keep doing it, even once they got the top job. Australians have been talking about the foodstuffs for weeks after the Prime Minister was unable to nominate a price of a loaf of bread when quizzed during his national press appearance. But the fact that he couldn't even mention the type of bread, he can name weird barramundi that he bought, you know, and he can name stuff that he does, which is not obtainable for any Australian. I'm sure he doesn't know the price of the alcohol that we pay for in Parliament House. A Sky News journalist on Tuesday asked Scott Morrison if he had lost touch with ordinary Aussies. Could the PM, for instance, name the price of a loaf of bread, a litre of fuel and a rapid antigen test? Morrison stated that he wasn't going to pretend that to you that I go out each day and buy a loaf of bread and a litre of milk. You can't even fake it for these people. He has over 30 advisors. And keep in mind, these aren't gotcha questions. To the Prime Minister, no, they're pre-asked. So keep in mind that they never, even if you have a look at the PVO question, do you know that they're all pre-looked at? So they know what's going to be asked. So keep in mind that their shock horror face is still there because they can't believe that they were being asked that. Not because they didn't know that they were going to be asked. Albo is not awarded the same level, but I can assure you there is a time when the questions are pre-asked. And they do have parameters for these questions. Sorry. And this stuff isn't hard to find out. I mean, you could say, look, here's my favourite lot of milk, here's what I spend on it. Or here's what the average Aussie spends. Go with a point of view of what's everyone else doing. To make matters worse, the Prime Minister's front bench colleague Stuart Roberts came to the defence on Wednesday, suggesting on the ABC that if Morrison's wife Jen was with him, should be able to rattle off the price of all the things they buy. Because of course Jen could. Because that's their solution to everything. But Jen can rattle it off. That's apparently a thing. Like when those women issues come up, they were like, let's ask Jen. Like, that's like who is actually running this country, the Prime Minister or his wife? Morrison is not the first politician to fall at this incredibly low hurdle. In fact, it seems every politician talks about, or even worse, and enters a supermarket and a disaster ensues. Wasn't there a politician that went and touched all the... Oh, yes! Okay, remember Queensland election, Deb Freckleton went into a grocery store, I'm not even kidding, and touched everything in the middle of the pandemic when you're told not to. So I suppose on one sense that's right. So they do stuff like this. Morrison is not the first politician to fall for this incredibly low hurdle. In fact, it seems every time a politician talks about it, and even worse, supermarket issue ensues. Here's some of the strangest, most embarrassing retail political blunders. Of course, we must begin with the incident when a bloke called the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, a dickhead in the hardware store. Oh, that's funny.
Tony Abbott faced some hostility of his own.
Good morning, sir. How are you? Dickhead. Oh, really?
Mr Abbott insists the carbon tax will cripple the coal industry.
Yeah, none of that turned out to be true. Well, he is a dickhead, but it didn't turn out to be true, the perception being put out there. So, On the other side of the aisle, the former Labor leader Bill Shorten, because of course they must do this, quiz on the price of lettuce. He did manage to produce some of the most excruciatingly awkward small talk in human history. The salad section at Woolworths. Okay, let's see if it's anything as bad as Tony Abbott.
What's your favourite type of lettuce?
I actually like iceberg.
Do you love a salad?
Yes, I like, well, not salad, I like lettuce.
Yeah, lettuce.
Fantastic.
Carrots.
Oh, you're every mother's joy.
That was not as bad as what they made out. I was expecting like this really awkward thing. The media always has to make it like, well, it's just as bad for the ALP. No, it wasn't. It was just a weird moment of talking about lettuce. There was also that time in 2012 when now Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce suggested Labor's carbon tax would hike up the price of a Sunday roast to $100. Despite his efforts to justify this wild prediction to the media in the following days, the statement was still roundly derided as ridiculous. Back in the days before Brexit, the British Prime Minister David Cameron was cornered in a radio interview, unable to name the price of a cheap loaf of bread. I don't buy the value of a sliced loaf. I've got a bread maker at home, and you can buy a loaf in the supermarket for the well north of £1. But this was not well north of £1. For the record, at the time it was 47p pound, which to make matters worse, then he recommended people to buy a $100 bread maker. Instead, they used Cotswold Crunch flour, which cost $30.20 for a 16-kilo bag. Oh, that one's pretty bad. Oh, nah. I thought the whole Prime Minister one was bad. Yeah. If you know anything about what's happened in England, you would know this was just real bad taste. Now you might think there's a way to make yourself seem posher than that. But the London Mayor, now UK Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, found a way the very next day. Oh, it got worse. Oh, this is great. When asked if the same bread-based question by a reporter, Johnson initially got right, suggesting 40 to 50p, but managed to undo all that good work by sarcastically stating he had no idea how much the value of bread costs, but could tell you the price of a bottle of champagne instead. Unfortunately, the country didn't seem to find the joke as funny as what he did. Of course it's not funny. These idiots, how did he ever get elected? If you remember, he weirdly there was this scandal going on. I don't even remember what it was, just before he got elected. And he hid in a freezer. And he still got elected. This is like the IQ of Britain. It was like the stupidest thing I've ever seen. How do idiots get elected? Back at home, in the ways, of course, of the infamous birthday cake debacle between Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating and opposition leader John Hewson. The year was 1993. Hewson was bashing his election campaign on a wild new concept of a goods and services tax, or GST. Of course, a Liberal would suggest it and make things really worse for people. But he faced a wave of public humiliation after an infamous interview on a current affair which he was unable to explain for birthday cake candles, and all would cost more than under the new taxation system. Alrighty.
All right, can I just ask you a simple question as an example of this? If I buy a birthday cake from a cake shop and GST is in place, do I pay more or less for that birthday cake?
Well, it will depend whether cakes today in that shop are subject to sales tax or they're not, firstly, and they may have a sales tax on them. Let's assume that they don't have a sales tax on them, and then that birthday cake is going to be sales tax free. Then, of course, you wouldn't pay, it would be exempt. There would be no GST on it under our system. If it was one with a sales tax today, it would attract the GST, and then the difference would be the difference between the two taxes, whatever the sales tax rate is on birthday cakes, how it's decorated, because there'll be sales tax perhaps on some of the decorations as well. And then, of course, the price will reflect that accordingly. But the key point is that the average Australian will have more money in their pocket.
No, but just on the birthday cake, because I'm just trying to pick a simple example.
Hold on. He went with, you'll have more money in your pocket, but it will cost you more. Am I missing something here? No! You can't go, okay. You get more money, but there'll be more money in your pocket, but there's a tax. Geez, the double speak of the Liberals are just unimaginable, terrible, terrible people.
Example, you tell us in what you've published that the cost of cake goes down, the cost of confectionery goes up.
That's right.
And there's icing and maybe ice cream, and then there's candles on top of it.
That's right. Now that's that's what I'm addressing in the question. To give you an accurate answer, I need to know exactly what type of cake to give a detailed answer. I mean, if it's just a cake from a cake shop that is not presently subject to sales tax, it will not attract the GST.
But isn't
but
that...
if it is a cake shop, it's cake from a shop that has sales tax and it's decorated and candles, as you say, that attract sales tax, then of course we scrap the sales tax before the GST
Okay, but
imposed.
it's just an example. If the answer to a birthday cake is so complex, you do have a problem with the overall GST.
Yeah, no, he bungled that 50 ways from Sunday, but that's... Keating had a field day with this staggering media opportunity in Brisbane, whereby he entered a pharmacy and asked which items would be subject to GST. The pharmacist didn't know. The media lapped it up. It was a great success. But there was a food-based humiliation to come for Keating as well. He attempted a stunt the second time, walking into a Nowra bakery, suggested by Labor local candidate Peter Knott, but instead happily chatting about how bloody confusing the GST was. The bakery owner grilled Keating for minutes about the end of the payroll tax in front of a crowd of eager journalists. The payroll tax was actually a state tax, but the damage was done. In other words, it was an idiot who didn't know what he's talking about and then attacked the then wanting to be Prime Minister Keating.
To the Dr. Hewson, is it taxable? Is it GST-able? The answer is it is.
Attempting to cash in on Dr. Hewson's embarrassment, the Prime Minister was made to eat humble pie after his GST stunt backfired.
Employing now another 40-odd people over the last 12 months. Now, all of a sudden, we're faced this year with a $45,000 payroll tax bill. To me, that seems immoral.
Last week, the statistician said we're growing at 2.4%.
The final charge to the ballot box began with the second great debate, as opinion polls showed Labor gaining in New South Wales, but the Liberals still expected to win.
It's denying the undeniable. Kerry, it's denying the undeniable. It's a bald-faced denial of the undeniable. And as well as that, we are...
He was not well all that day, or the next couple of days for that matter, but I don't think he considered at any stage that he shouldn't front.
But the economy's not growing. Look, there's been some measured growth.
It was clear that John Hewson did not want to be there under those conditions, and they didn't want him there. It was clear they were worried about him not being able to explain his own policies. So for the first half hour, he sat there like a dead fish. Clearly, body language saying, I don't want to be here, let me out.
Again, it got GST up at the start of the last week in a way which really set the pattern for the undecideds to spin off in the last week. And I think it was a big advantage to them in that sense. It got a negative issue up in a quite strong way.
Labor has to go! Labor has to go! Labor has to go!
During the last week, John Hewson largely confined his campaign to street rallies. He avoided the major current affairs programs.
That last week in public rallies was a disaster, in my view, for them and for John Hewson. We brought all that back. That if you dissented, you took off your jacket and jumped in the crowd and started ringing somebody for not agreeing with you. Scum! And I think it all that resurfaced, all those concerns about his personality and the sort of the absolutism of their policies resurfaced in that last week, and to their disadvantage.
Could you believe it?
I just wished that they kept the rallies going twice a day, let alone once. And I thought at some stage they would stop, but they didn't.
How significant were the rallies?
Well, that'll be debated for a long time, I think. I do think the earlier rallies were really quite successful. I mean, we were looking to, again, convey towards the end of a campaign that there was a lot of support for this program of change, which people still, in the main, didn't understand the totality of it. And we allowed Labor some advance warning on our program, and some of the TV pictures, I think, might have been counterproductive.
Did you think you should have changed when the last couple of rallies were showing images of divisiveness rather than a man you can trust?
The capacity to turn that around was pretty limited by that stage. And, you know, I think there really wasn't the opportunity to reverse the strategy in the last 2 or 3 days, even if we'd wanted to.
I thought we had an excellent week. I think Paul put in a flawless performance from the night of that Sunday night debate right through, and I think their last week was appalling, and I couldn't believe every night I watched them repeating and multiplying their errors, hoping they'd continue to do it right throughout the week, which they did.
You know, Mr. Keating's telling me that I should be in Canberra today talking with journalists.
While the Liberals were stuck with an inflexible strategy that was producing images of confrontation, Paul Keating was blitzing the media with his message that voters couldn't trust John Hewson.
He said, what could be worse than another 3 years of Labor? And it's a very simple answer, a GST forever.
The one thing that the Prime Minister is good at, I mean, I'm biased, so it's not much point asking me about what he's good at, because I don't reckon he's good at much, but the one thing he's good at is what you call the effective use of language. I mean, in politics, getting a message across is all about repetition, but penetration into people's minds through strong repetition of making words visualised for people.
The scramble for gain, based on avarice and greed, one group pitted against the other, all clambering, all clutching, all snatching, with heartless contempt for one's fellows. It'll be Gordon Gekko writ large.
I mean, the Prime Minister repeats the same point over and over and over again. I mean, if I heard once, I heard 1,000 times in relation to industrial relations. Do you want a cooperative, decent, caring society where Australian men and women are working together? Or do you want the dog-eat-dog approach the scratch them, rip them down, tear them up approach of the opposition?
He's sitting on legislation which is complete and won't show it because he knows it's about cutting the wages and salaries of Australians to ribbons. He knows it's about cutting their wages and salaries to pieces. He's monkey cunning, he's hanging onto it, and he's sitting onto it.
It's repetition of a point in penetrating language to distinguish the two parties. And we've got to get better at that. We've got to get better at that.
All that I know is every time I watch television, Paul Keating was there saying GST, GST, GST. And if that's not enough, I'll say it to you 43 more times, GST. What time is it, Paul? Well, it's 3:15, and there'll be a 15.
Geez, they were salty about this and they got their own way anyway. They're biggest crybabies ever.
GST on everything. Yes, they were unremitting in that.
Did the Liberal Party ever have an internal poll that said it would lose this election?
On several occasions during the campaign, in the marginal seats, we had a 50-50 situation in a lot of seats. So we weren't exactly behind, but we weren't in front.
Did the ALP's internal polling ever say that it would win the election?
No.
It's the day before the election. It's been a tough, gruelling campaign. What goes through your mind right now?
Well, what a long journey it's been. 10 years in opposition. It's a long time and it's tough. But it's been a hard struggle over about 15 years to get the sort of ideas in place that I think are necessary to make the change we have to make.
As the man responsible for the coalition's transition to government, Jim Carlton believed he was about to fulfil a dream. His faction of free marketeers had won control of the Liberal Party. Now they appear to be only one day away from winning control of the country.
I felt that we had to fight very hard, and that's quite difficult in a party. The other thing was that people were frightened of a lot of the ideas. A lot of them they didn't think were politically assailable. And, you know, we've seen quite a bit of that in this campaign. I mean, they are difficult to, change is difficult to sell.
And GST included?
Well, of course.
10 years is long enough.
We're on our first booth at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I must say that we were shattered to arrive on the booths at that time and find that the ALP posters were on every booth.
They were using a little catch cry, vote Labor, vote against the GST and save Medicare, and I thought, oh, this is awful. So I'd give my pamphlet and say, you know, vote for employment, vote for Liberals.
No. That's why.
I went to Mass at 9:30 and I had my prayer book and my glasses. I knelt down and I started to cry. And I cried. And I cried. And I took my glasses off and I put my sunglasses on. And I continued to cry. And then I had to use my handkerchief. And friends came up to me and said, "Are you all right? Has someone died?" Well, then the heavens opened.
No, it's worse. The Liberals have lost.
Oh, devastation. There were people there who'd put in a great deal more work than I had. And to watch their faces, one fellow whom I've known for years, I just can't get his face out of my head. It was just like there'd been a death in his family. And that's how most of us felt. It wasn't so much the losing, because, you know, we had our fair share of losing in past years, but it was the way we'd been decimated. And then when the shock started to settle in, people were sort of saying to one another, well, you know, we never really thought the GST was a winner, but nobody would listen.
Some people we've spoken to just can't explain how the Liberal Party ended up with a goods and services tax.
Well, it gets back to one of the fundamental problems in the party, which is that the...
This brings me to, just before I let that play on, this brings me to of how high taxing this party is. All they do is introduce new taxes, and they make the cost of living unimaginably bigger. And you can't tell me that that's what they didn't eventually get here. That's when my grocery bills were like insanely high.
Organisational, the average branch member, like your common garden member, has no say and really very little influence over the policies of the party. Now that arrangement has to stop. There have to be changes, and the basic grassroots member has to have a say over policy. I mean, the days of policy solely being made by the parliamentary party at state and federal levels, those days have to be gone.
So you're still willing to fight on?
Of course. It's a relentless struggle. And it has to have a human face. There has to be a human outcome to it. And I can still see that as a vision.
So we can do it again. This we can do. This, I believe, is doable. Why? We've done this before. We've been here before. We've had this moment before where it's looked like the Liberals should be losing. This one, I'm certain that they should. I was certain last one was it. But they were able to get away with more sneakier lies, AEC signs, and then there was the whole dodginess of the deals that they sort of made with Palmer and his money thrown into it. I don't think they're going to get away with this time. I think they're going to try new sneaky tactics. And I think that giving them more time is a very, very bad idea. Keep in mind that our politics is really venomous right now. This is like no other time in history. So there's a reason that they're not concerned anymore with the price of milk and bread, because to them it doesn't matter. They got their GST, they got their taxes, and they are the highest taxing government in history. In history. You can't argue this crap anymore. The facts don't care about your feelings. The facts cannot be wavered anymore. We cannot let a complicit media tell you that it's same. Or Labor does it worse because the Liberals claim it and they can't tell the difference. Of course we can. Of course we absolutely can. But don't take my word for it. Take Labor's, because their policy is strong and wonderful, and I believe that we can have an amazing political landscape. Now, I want to draw back to the Labor Green thing. I really, I have a video clip that I'm just going to quickly let play out, and then we'll look at wrapping it up. So I need you guys to understand where we are coming from. We are coming from a place of the Libs won last time with 1 seat majority. We can do this. We absolutely can. I believe wholeheartedly this is it. Give it all we've got. Rock up to the polling booths. Beat the rhetoric. Beat the rhetoric. Be the change that you want to see. I fundamentally am going to keep going and try to get this other program working again, because I want this lovely lady to appear with me on screen. Because I'm going to have another crying week of trying to make it work. I've worked out how to do this, so surely there can be a way of working out that. Don't know. But my daughter starts year 10 tomorrow, and there's definitely going to be a lot of crying this week. So I want to thank you all for tuning in and having a amazing time here and showing me how to get this stuff moving along. I like this program because it's so easy. It's like a video streaming for idiots. It has like the simplest programs, but I haven't been able to get anyone to join me on this particular setup. That's the plan. But I do really want a co-host. Like, I'm actually laser focused on making that happen. So till next week, I think we've had a magical evening together. I want to reconvene as the weeks go on. Thank you for a wonderful night, and see you next time next week, hopefully on the Facebook live stream. Thank you. Bye guys. Like,